So you want to be in Soldier? Hang in there. So, is everybody here now?
Sir!
You're all rookies, right?
Sir! Yes, sir!
One piece of advice. No. An order. Embrace your dreams. And, whatever happens, protect your soldier honor. Got it?
Sir!
We're all coming back here alive. You hear me? Let's go.
Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII was one of the most influential games to ever release that not only added substantial backstory to the world of Final Fantasy VII, but also alluded to things to come. It had a monumental impact on gamers the world over, myself included, with how absolutely wonderful Zack Fair was portrayed and his journey from idealistic youth to war-torn soldier. This game, for all of its amazing world building and character development, has been left for 15 years on a long dead platform being the PSP or PlayStation Portable, with no way to legitimately play the game on modern hardware, and has an entire new generation of Final Fantasy VII fans unable to experience it. Square-Enix decided to rectify this by not just re-releasing the game in its original form, but by completely remaking the game from the ground up in Unreal Engine 4 and carrying over aspects from Final Fantasy VII Remake, giving players a decidedly new experience. Is it a full-on remaster or remake, or does it somehow fit into the current remake trilogy? The answers to those questions lie in playing the game for yourself, as what I can do with this review is answer if this game is worth spending your hard-earned money on. So, let's find out. The story of Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion is one of two prequels to the original Final Fantasy VII, and by proxy, Final Fantasy VII Remake. We step into the shoes of Soldier, second-class operative Zack Fair as he strives to one day not only make Soldier first class, but also achieve his dream of being a hero. Zack is under the tutelage of his first-class superior, Angel Hewley, as he undergoes various missions for Shinra and gains field experience. Zack is often overconfident, if not downright hyper, when it comes to proving his capabilities as an operative of Soldier, much to the ire of Angel, who often tries to teach him the values of honor as Soldier and views him as a hyper puppy. Zack and Angel are tasked with helping end the long war between Wutai and Shinra, as well as handle the mass desertion from Soldier, led by Soldier First Class Genesis Rhapsodus. With Angel also deserting Soldier due to his moral conflict, it is up to Zack and the legendary hero Sephiroth to uncover the mysteries that lie beneath the surface of Shinra that ultimately binds and controls the fate of all these men, and the price of freedom. I know you all want to know how the game runs on the Nintendo Switch and Steam Deck, and I'm here to say the game runs flawlessly on both. On the Nintendo Switch, especially on the OLED screen, the game just pops and feels like this is what it was meant to be experienced on with that beautiful screen. The game runs at 720p 30 frames per second on the Nintendo Switch in docked mode and 720p 30 frames per second in handheld mode. Yes, unfortunately it doesn't run at 1080p on the Nintendo Switch, but hey, it is what it is. On the Steam Deck, you have a variety of options to choose from when connected to a monitor or TV, as you can run the game all the way up to 1080p with a variable refresh rate fluctuating between 30 and 50, while the sweet spot I find is 1080p with the FPS set to 40Hz. Portably on deck, it runs at a native 800 by 1280 at 60 frames per second, with settings like the graphics maxed out to the highest, which gives you 3.5 hours of battery life and can go higher than 4 hours if you optimize the settings. If you play this on a gaming PC, then you can run this at 4K at 120 frames per second if you wanted to. Unfortunately, the game doesn't allow for support of ultra-wide monitors, so you'll see black bars on both sides of your screen. On the Xbox One, Xbox Series S, and base PS4, The game runs at 1080p at 30 frames per second, while on the PlayStation 4 Pro and Xbox One X, the game runs at 1080p 60 frames per second and 4K 30 frames per second using checkerboard upscaling. On the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, the game runs at 4K at 60 frames per second, as well as 1080p at 120 frames per second. If you're on PC, then you can play using mouse and keyboard as opposed to just controller. When it comes to the gameplay, Crisis Core Reunion, CCR going forward, has been rebuilt from the ground up and plays almost nothing like the original PSP game. In the original, you were able to cycle through commands, magic, and items by using the L and R shoulder buttons on the PSP, with X being your selection button. The analog nub allowed you to move about the environments and battlefield, while circle allowed you to dodge, roll, and combat. The entirety of combat in the original made sense for the platform that it was on, but ultimately would not work in the modern era of gaming nor for modern gamers. While CCR is no Final Fantasy VII Remake, it does a fantastic job of preserving its core foundation while borrowing from the modern siblings aesthetic. The game was originally built with the PSP in mind, so there will be instances where you will see its PSP roots showing, such as with how the game emphasizes its zone-centric smaller environments, bite-sized missions, short yet rewarding side quests, and chapter-based story structure. This may be off-putting to many newer and modern gamers, but overall it won't impact the general fun of the game. Depending on the chapter that you're in, you can traverse to different areas such as Shinra HQ, downtown Midgar, by Goblin's Bar, the Sector 7 slum, Eris Church, and more. These areas are substantially smaller than what you would experience in Remake, as they aren't open sandbox areas, but are closer to being a small playground that you can explore. You're able to explore and find treasure chests as well as talk to various NPCs, which can offer up subquests, as well as find shops to purchase new gear. You can also do this from your status menu as well. Going to save points offers up not only the ability to save, but also allows you to select missions to partake in. More on the missions later. Bringing up your status menu will allow you to check and change out your equipment, along with doing material fusion, which lets you create stronger and newer material. Check your mail to see who's been contacting you, as well as various tutorials. And finally, you can save your game and check out the various options for game settings, like changing the difficulty and more. Pushing the right shoulder button will bring up the mail section of the status menu, which is something that you'll want to check often for both plot purposes and if you need refreshers on the game's various mechanics. There's also now a sprint button, which allows Zack to get around areas substantially faster, and this is a great addition, especially if you've played the original, as Zack's default jog would make exploring areas an absolute chore. Combat is now incredibly fast and fluid, with you being able to attack, guard, and cast magic, and dodge at a moment's notice that harkens to the fluidity of Remake, while still having the random encounters occurring when roaming about the game's various missions and dungeons. You can finally move the camera freely in both the field and in battles with the right analog stick, along with targeting enemies now being done by clicking in the right analog stick, with you being able to cycle through targeted enemies by holding down the left shoulder button and moving the right analog stick left or right. No longer do you have to cycle through action commands, as now every action for Zack is mapped to a button. Materia actions and magic casting is now mapped to the left shoulder button, which will expand to include all the face buttons as well as the right shoulder button and trigger. Item selection is done using the left and right triggers, and then using B, A, or circle, depending on the controller you're using, to use an item, and is the only instance of the old action selection system that remains from the PSP original. Battles play out just as they did in the originals, with you either entering random battles at points or scripted story fights, with you needing to take out various enemies to end the encounters. You still have the DMW slots, which flow like a slot machine and will activate various in-battle stat buffs and bonuses for Zack, as well as give him the ability to use limit breaks and summons. Limit breaks and summons are obtained when you get any three of the same characters in the DMW. The limit break or summon that you get is entirely random, so do keep that in mind, but they are usually effective for the situations that you find yourself in. Completing battles after a certain point in the game will net you some benefits such as health, magic, and SB restoration, based around how well you fight. How you end fights, be it with magic or ability materia, or limit breaks or summons, or if you don't take any damage at all. Missions are such as they were in the original, with you being able to access various missions from the save spheres on the field. When selecting a mission, you're given a brief plot synopsis of what is going on, along with the mission objectives and the item that you gain from completing the mission. Within missions are usually several items that you can get from chests, such as potions, elixirs, phoenix downs, remedies, and the like, as each mission will have anywhere from 1 to 6 chests for you to find as you explore the environment. Due to how the game's difficulty level scales, it is best to spend some time grinding it out in missions to gain some levels and gain items, as some of the material and accessories you gain from doing missions can make the difference when it comes to defeating enemies and bosses in the main campaign. Graphically, CCR compared to the original is an astronomical upgrade in every way possible, and is on par to an extent to that of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, as the entire game has been rebuilt in Unreal Engine 4. The character models have all been updated to reflect the models that we saw in Remake, which includes the Buster Sword, now reflecting the one we saw in Remake, as well as its original design over the Crisis Core and Advent Children style redesign. And we even have Sephiroth's outfit incorporating some of the designs that he had in Remake. All of the FMVs have been upscaled to look good on the various platforms and range from the 720p and 800p resolutions of the Nintendo Switch and Steam Deck respectively, all the way up to 4K on the current generation platforms and PC. Any FMV that featured the Buster Swords, Crisis Core, and Advent Children design has been redone to reflect the remake version, and this includes all original CGI artwork from Crisis Core. It can be a bit jarring at times to see the various character renders in the modern remake style and the original FMVs, as the game will flow between them at a moment's notice. Character animations are for the most part fully redone, with attack animations being redone to be more realistic and fluid, while the majority of the game seems to have the new graphics layered over the previous handmade motions and mocapped animations. Environments are all way more vibrant and reflect a good balance of the remake's upgrades while keeping the original's look and aesthetics intact. When it comes to the voice acting, the game has an entirely new cast in comparison to the original, with all the recasted voices that you heard in Remake reprising their roles. I honestly don't mind any of the new voices here, as the delivery of lines is pretty on point and takes into account the relocalization efforts of some of the lines that were incorrectly read or mistranslated in the original game. Another neat fact with the voice acting is that there are certain scenes, well, a large majority of the scenes in the original Crisis Core, that were unvoiced and were just text only. So a lot of times when you're talking to NPCs, or if you were in certain cutscenes or chapter transition scenes, there would just be text that you're going to be reading as the character mouth flips would just open and close. But this remake slash remaster goes the distance to allow for all of the game to be fully voice acted, and I really appreciate that. Now, with all the praise I've been giving the voice acting, I have to talk about the negative, because the largest glaring problem is the fact that Caleb Pierce, who voices Zack Fair, is honestly the absolute worst part of this game. I'm not sure if the blame should be put on the voice director or if Caleb just wanted to make Zack his own, but regardless, his rendition of Zack is just awful, as he doesn't deliver any of Zack's lines with the right amount of cadence, emotion, or nuance that Zack's previous voice actor Rick Gomez did.
So I can cut loose, right?
Use some discretion.
It's showtime.
Zack,
And Gio, I can cut loose, right?
within reason.
It's showtime. You know, I've never actually seen you use that. Don't you think it's sort of a waste?
Use brings about wear, tear, and rust. And that's a real waste.
You know, I've never actually seen you use that. Don't you think it's sort of a waste?
Use brings about wear, tear, and rust, and that's a real waste.
Heaven?
Not quite. Church in the slums. Hello?
Heaven?
Not quite. It's a church.
By the way, what is your dream? To become first? Is it?
No. To become a hero.
By the way, what is your dream? To become first? Is it?
No, to become a hero.
This leaves key moments of the game that are incredibly emotional left feeling flat and unimpactful when you compare it to the original voice actor's performance. I tried my best to enjoy, to an extent, Caleb's take on Zack Fair when he initially voiced him in Remake, and I never could come to grips with it. Playing through this entire game, having to listen to him as the voice of Zack, it just makes me cringe every time he delivers any line that Rick had absolutely nailed. And honestly, because of this, I'm patiently waiting for when PC users make a mod that will allow for players to replace all of Caleb's lines with Rick's. When it comes to the OST, I mean, honestly, what can I say then other than all you need to do is listen to the classics from this game, such as Under the Apple Tree, The World's Enemy, Fulfill Desire, The Price of Freedom, and the main theme, Why, in both its instrumental version and the one performed by Japanese artist Ayaka. For the most part, all of the songs have been redone and updated in subtle ways to maintain faithfulness to the original score. All in all, not a bad track on this game's OST at all. Alright, so let's talk about the general negatives. So what are the downsides of CCR? Well, for many, it will be the need to go through missions, as the game will at times spike in difficulty between chapters and different segments within chapters, and will almost force you to need to go and do missions to grind, although this can be mitigated by changing the difficulty level if you find the game to be too hard. The last downside is simply just the voice of Zack. I told you, I don't like Caleb Pierce's take on Zack. I think it's absolutely awful. And he's a great, phenomenal actor, but his performance as Zack is just, as a fan of Crisis Core and a fan of the character Zack, I just hate his take on Zack. It doesn't land for me. But hey, I've already touched on that. So wrapping everything up, is Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion worth it for new gamers who played Remake and for series vets who played the original? Yes, to both. While it may not have the exact mechanics that you experienced in Remake, it does its best to update the gameplay for a modern audience while giving a ton of quality of life upgrades for those who have played the original to make this a definitive way to experience the masterpiece of this story that sets the stage for the entirety of the Final Fantasy VII saga. If you never played the original PSP release, then Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion is an absolute must-play, as it gives you not only backstory on the characters you love, but also allows you to see them in a different light and gives a ton of context to everything that you may already know about Final Fantasy VII as a whole. With awesome all-new graphics, substantial gameplay improvements, a phenomenal voice cast, except for Zack, and the mere fact that this classic is available on all platforms for the first time in 15, almost 16 years, this makes Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion one of the best games of 2022 and the best way to end the year.
Even if tomorrow is barren of promises, nothing shall forestall my return.